As Haiti's capital lies in ruins, geologists are trying to assess the risk of future earthquakes in the region. And there are signs that the city may still be at risk. It's thought stress has moved along the fault line, closer to Port-au-Prince. An aerial survey by geologist Roger Billum uncovered remarkable surface cracks, scarring the mountain. But intriguingly, no evidence that the fault line broke the surface. Now, as he flies towards the coast, he sees more evidence of the dramatic power of the earthquake.
You can see heads of the corals sticking out of water, which of course is an unnatural condition for most corals. The shoreline has retreated perhaps 100 meters as a result of uplift here.
It's a big surprise. Haiti's strike-slip fault is not behaving as he had expected. A vast section of coral reef has bulged upwards, pushing well above the high water mark. Studying this uplift will help scientists understand the complex behavior of Haiti's fault line. But then moving along the coast, Billum notices yet another dramatic change. A huge swathe of farmland has subsided into the ocean. Further south, a lone tree provides a yardstick for just how far the land has fallen.
The tree's already dead. The sea is eroding into the soil.
Billum has discovered an unexpected consequence of the earthquake. Land to the north of the fault has bulged upwards, whilst land to the south has subsided. Eyewitness reports reveal the hazardous side effects of these alterations to the landscape. As the ground violently shifted, it displaced large volumes of seawater, setting off small, localized tsunami, which killed 7 people. But future earthquakes could trigger much larger tsunami. Haiti is surrounded by a complex jigsaw of tectonic plates. And just off the northeast coast of the island is a second and potentially much more deadly fault. This is the main junction between the North American and Caribbean plates.
We have the Caribbean plate, we have the American plate. The American plate is pushing down underneath it, and it's causing the Caribbean plate to bend like this. Now, what can happen is that the plate pings back upwards, producing a big earthquake and also transmitting energy into the ocean and generating a big tsunami. That's what we saw in Sumatra in 2004 in the Indian Ocean.
The Boxing Day tsunami of 2004 began with a massive magnitude 9.2 earthquake off the coast of Sumatra. The third biggest earthquake on record, it occurred when a huge section of the Earth's crust rebounded, displacing billions of tons of seawater in all directions. The tsunami charged across the Indian Ocean. As it reached land, it washed away buildings, cars, and anyone that stood in its path. It killed over 230,000 people in 18 different countries. The large subduction fault lying off the northeast coast of Haiti has the potential to violently rupture in the same way, generating an immense magnitude 9 earthquake.
If there is one of these big subduction zone earthquakes, then it will rupture a length of fault which may be as long as 1,000 kilometers.
It would create a gigantic wave, traveling at the speed of a jumbo jet. Within 20 minutes, it would hit the coast of the Dominican Republic and then deluge Haiti and the rest of the Caribbean. After an hour, it would flood South America, Florida, then swamp the Gulf Coast. Within 7 hours, the tsunami would travel over 4,000 miles across the Atlantic to crash on the beaches of Africa and Western Europe. This nightmare scenario could be imminent. The geological record has revealed that Haiti's subduction fault has not ruptured for 1,000 years. But even though many geologists are convinced that this event will happen, they cannot exactly say when. These reports should not be dismissed as scaremongering. 2 years ago, geologists warned that Haiti's strike-slip fault was a serious risk. They looked at how far the Earth's plates should have moved and for how long they have been jammed.
We knew the rate along the fault. It's about 7 millimeters a year. We knew from our historical studies that the last big earthquake in the Port-au-Prince area was about 1750 or so. So simple math calculation, the number of years since that last earthquake multiplied by the rate, the 7 millimeters a year, gives you a distance. And that's the amount of stress or strain that's built up on that fault over that period of hundreds of years.
With remarkable accuracy, scientists estimated that a magnitude 7.2 earthquake could strike, and that the cities of Port-au-Prince and Kingston, Jamaica, were in serious danger. But crucially, they couldn't predict precisely where or when it might hit. No one took notice of the warning, and the consequences are now all too clear.
Predicting is giving you the time and place of an earthquake that's yet to come. And despite all of our efforts over the last 30 years, we're nowhere close to that.
It may be that we're dealing with such a complex natural system, these faults, that we may never get to prediction.
But even if it's possible to accurately predict earthquakes in the future, it's controversial how useful this might be.
It may be that we don't want to predict earthquakes anyway. In California, for example, imagine that they could predict an earthquake to the nearest week 6 months ahead, maybe a magnitude 8 earthquake under Los Angeles. What would have to happen? The city would have to be evacuated, millions and millions of people, and they would have to be looked after for months on end. What they decided to do in California is to build properly so that buildings don't fall down and people don't get killed. It's about making buildings life safe, as they call it. So it's probably good if we take away, if we move away from prediction and focus much more on building properly.
But scientists can pinpoint vulnerable faults at risk of imminent rupture. 8 out of 10 of the world's most populous cities lie on active plate boundaries and earthquake danger zones. From Ecuador and Mexico to Japan and India, hundreds of millions of people are at risk.
Now, one of those places is Istanbul. There have been a series of earthquakes travelling along the North Anatolian fault from east to west since the 1930s. The last big one was in 1999, killed 18,000 people, and there's only one bit of that fault left to unzip, and that's directly south of Istanbul. So there's a very high chance of a big earthquake there within the next 10 to 30 years.
Over the past 100 years, earthquakes have killed almost 2 million people, and a third of those have been in the last decade. More people are at risk now than at any other time.
It's not because there are more earthquakes or because they're bigger earthquakes, it's because places where people live now, urban centres in high seismic risk zones, are getting bigger. So there are more and more people vulnerable and exposed in seismic zones.
And it's developing countries that have borne the brunt of these earthquake casualties. Of the 600,000 people killed in the last 10 years, 99% have been in urban sprawls, whose buildings were ill-prepared.
We don't seem to learn anything from disasters. They happen every single year, these major catastrophes now, and they all happen for the same reason. Too many people living in areas of high geological activity, living in marginal areas, living in buildings that can't withstand the stresses that are imposed upon them. And in many cases, that threat has been known and it's been documented.
Tragically, the immense death toll caused by January's earthquake could have been reduced if warnings had been heeded and people alerted to the risk. A team of international scientists are now analyzing the gathered data to understand how and why Haiti's earthquake happened. The investigation is at a very early stage, but they already know stress remains in the fault line and Port-au-Prince is still under threat from future earthquakes. So what can be done to prevent this island from suffering another major catastrophe?
I think humans have this feeling that we can control everything. Well, earthquakes and plates moving around are something we can't control. It's like living on a time bomb, and we don't know when that time bomb is going to go off.
Haiti's only protection against earthquakes is to be prepared.
There's a lot of steps here about educating people, about trying to improve the way they construct their homes and offices. It's not an easy task, especially in a country like Haiti where they don't have a lot of resources. They're going to need a lot of help.
The earthquake demolished Haiti's capital. Rebuilding it will be a massive undertaking.
We've seen the destruction of a megacity. This is the first time since Tokyo 1923 that a gigantic city's been hit by an earthquake. I mean, it's just indescribable. It's the first time we've really zapped a megacity below the belt. It's really unfair on the Haitians. Here's the thing, scientists really don't have emotions. And looking at the damage, it looks like any other city that's just after an earthquake. But one thing really tore my heart out. I saw this, must have been a, I don't know, 2-year-old little girl who obviously had a terrible problem with the eye. And this nurse was bandaging her up. And it was all quiet, and the baby or the child was quiet. It seemed to sum up the whole thing. That it was heartrending. I just couldn't. I mean.
It's been only 3 weeks since Haiti's devastating earthquake. It caused one